late.
Evening, calling into session work session number 3. Happy Valentine's Day. There's no one I'd love to spend it more than all of you.
You're a good
And I'm
liar,
sure
Pam.
you all feel the same. We apologize to all of your Valentines. And Ms. Meeker, will you take the roll?
Sure will. Ms. Boucher.
Here.
Ms. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Hastings.
Here.
Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
Ms. Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Here.
I am here, and Bob Cotton is on his way.
Yes.
All right.
In the absence of Mrs. Murphy, can I turn it over to? Well,
Turned over to me.
Yeah.
we'll start with Ms. Yarla,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
The floor is yours. Up first is student services.
Yes. We're going to start with Mr. Fabrizio.
Up first is special service presentation, and then followed by curriculum instruction and assessment presentation. So we'll turn it to John.
All right, thank you.
And I will turn it over to Jack to start off, and we're going to talk about some of the financials. And then once we get through the financials, I'll kind of give you some of the state of student services and why we are where we are today. So, Jack?
Okay, so at a high level, the two functions for this program are 1,200 and 2,100. These are the salaries breakdown and where those increases are. Most of that is all collectively bargained under the salaries. Under the benefits, again, same thing. Most of it, there's nothing here that, it's all tied to the salaries, because as the salaries go up, the New Hampshire retirement goes up, the FICA goes up, and obviously health insurance, but this is specifically to student services. On the professional services side, the small increase of 3,600, and then a decrease in the other professional services, but they're coming in rather flat.
Are you going to talk about what those are, or will John do that after?
I will do that. I will come back to you after that. All day this takes to put these two together, so I have my notes, but, and then level funding, the purchase property, which is any repair and maintenance, and the copy machines, because special ed does have their own machines in those offices, so they are charged to those. And then, again, level funded all these lines, as well as the out-of-district placements. I do note here that we are taking $350,000 out of the Special Education Trust Fund to fund an expense that's within that 2.7 for a placement. And then on the supplies, books, and utilities, this is, we have went through all the software and all the info access fees. This is anything to relate with online access to items. Post-COVID, because of the remote work, there was a lot of things that were put into ESSER, put into the general fund, that was, a lot of it was all under tech. So that's function 2225 and object 665,000, or 664,300 is info access. As you can see there on the that left number, 664,300 info access, 665 software. And what we did this year was we went through and redistributed. If it was for a specific department, they got charged for it. Because right now it was all funded under tech, and it makes it look like the technology budget is a big ticket item. But really, these are specific to either students or specific to departments. So we went through every software and redistributed them. So net,
Can I just talk
Yeah.
about what those, some of those are? So what some of those are, just to give you kind of a thing, is for our multilingual learner population, our ML population, we have a thing called Elevations. It helps us track their state assessment score and their level of need. And then it's like a database, best way to say it, but an active database that allows us to help with instruction and things like that. So Elevations is part of that. That's part of that. We have a new 504 software that we'll be implementing next year to help us track our 504s and make those a little more streamlined, a little more cohesive throughout the district. You'll hear the theme about that a lot in my presentation tonight. In doing so, it will also allow us to bill more towards Medicaid. It's been a goal for the department since I've come, is trying to get a little more organized around that so we can bill. The way we currently sit right now, we don't have enough of a structure and a software system that speaks to the Medicaid billing system to be able to do that. So it's one of the upgrades we're making this year in there. And then other things would happen is I have a online protocols and test assessments called Q Global. That's a pretty large piece of this, and that allows us to do all of our special ed assessments. So those are kind of the things that make up. Jack and I sat and went through what are specific to my departments that I oversee doing that.
Can you explain what's new this year and how much it costs?
So what's new in there is $17,000 for the 504 software that'll be happening. And that's the training and the software together coming into that. So it's able to the implementation. That's all that's new into that.
Anyone have questions?
Okay. And then for equipment, kept level funded. And then dues and fees also kept level funded. On the revenue side, the first tuition is Project Search, which is ran out of the hospital. And then you have the regular day tuition for the preschool, which I had mentioned in our last meeting about fees, and they had proposed to eliminate it. We did not this year. Currently, it has brought in $48,000, even though we budgeted $35,000 for this year. So we'll see. And then the tuition from other LEAs is special ed for Deerfield. And that's it. So that makes up the local revenue. One other thing I should note also that I didn't get to is noting the state aid for special education aid, which I will update that and let you know what that is. And we'll do that in the updates at the Monday meeting.
Medicaid is, oh, sorry, Ms. Daniel.
Is is preschool, only non-identified children are charged tuition, correct?
Correct.
If you have a special need, you get transportation and you get to go. Okay.
And I have a slide in there to show you those numbers too.
Yeah,
as
it's
I
been
get
that way
to my
forever, I just wanted to
presentation.
make sure.
Yep, that's exactly how it works.
Ms. Hastings?
That slide does not match what we have here.
That's why I hate print. Well, let's see.
Let's have a look.
I'm not seeing this broken down under
You sure under revenue?
the revenue. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same as
or
mine.
page
Should.
6, slide 12.
Okay, well, that's what I guess where I'm,
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay.
thought we were still working off this
Sorry.
first one. Sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
Yep.
can you just let us know what page you're on when you're using these two, because I didn't, maybe you did and I didn't hear it.
So, okay, yep,
Thank
so
you.
page 6.
Page 6, not that.
So
Page
we don't
6,
have
slide 12.
Medicaid revenue under special student
That's under
services?
federal revenue,
That's under
so I will
federal
note that
revenue.
as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the revenue gets confusing because it's where it comes from, not what it's for. So,
Right.
yeah.
Because, and then you get into adequacy, and there's another little component in there, because if they're identified kids, there's a small fraction in there. So I'll give you a little bit more detail to that, but
Mr. Richards?
Yeah, my question is just that you had identified that some of the software programs and all were for increasing what we might receive from Medicaid or Medicare. How much of an increase are you anticipating using that software?
I have no data yet to show you that.
Okay.
Because it is the first time that Concord will have billed for that. So the scope of it, we're going to sit and talk to the vendor once we get it up and running and kind of come to that conclusion about what are schools average in that. We haven't done it yet, so it's kind of, It's billable services for any nursing services, any OT services, or any counseling services. So the scope of that, like I said, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because, to be brutally honest, in the current system we use under our internal system, it's basically a PDF upload right now, and I have to go through every 504 to list out what those services would be. The software will be built right into it, so it will automatically calculate that for me and give me spreadsheets like I have for the Nessus system for special ed right now. I can find data and pull data. I don't have a system currently for 504s to do that.
And we can't use the same system for IEPs
No.
as why not?
They don't, the state owns the system for the IEPs,
Okay.
and we through indirect cost in our grants, everyone in New Hampshire pays a portion to have the state run that system.
And is this a one-time software fee, or is it a licensing fee that'll continue on for years?
It's about, I think, 6,800, is that the number? I'm talking about 6,800 for year annually to keep the system. It's about $10,000 to get all the, all the uploads in, all the IT work that needs to happen, all the training, all the input. That's going to take about $10,000 to do that in the first year.
Thank you.
504 plans aren't special ed either. They
No.
come from Americans from Disabilities Act,
Right.
ADA. So I could see where billing would be different.
Yeah.
Can we take a brief break? The superintendent is
Hmm?
calling me, and I don't know if she's confused by the time change.
Sure.
That's great. I'm gonna throw away some orange
They
peels.
want to
Yeah.
tell us they might be announcing the superintendent of the year.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
it might be,
Missed it there.
be in the from Conval.
Hi, everybody.
How are you? What day are you going to
You
be?
know what? We're here. We're not in Nashua.
We're still on.
We're in
Oh.
Concord.
Just so we know, our
We're
mics
not
are
in Nashua again until.
Our mics are still on, just so people know that. Because he had to step out. We didn't know.
All right, thank you.
Big stack.
Okay, show's on.
Big stack.
Okay, show's on.
Jack, you good with your part?
I am good with my part.
All right, you want to
Back
click in? All right, so student services, and you'll see all my little buckets of pennies there that I collect to try to do this in the budget. And I have a lot of data for you right now to show you some numbers, some slides. Please, if there's any questions, you can pause along the way, or in the end, just save them, and I can certainly talk to you. But Jack, when you're ready. So most important factor is to just, knowing that I like to present this to the board and the public each year, that my budget is based on two very important laws under IDEA. And the first one is free and appropriate public education, and I have a little acronym for that up there. It's free. It means that families who need these services are paid by taxpayers and paid by our funds, our federal funds, to make it happen. It's appropriate. That means we have an IEP team that meets and looks at the child's needs, including the parent and any people the parent wishes to bring to the table, and support the student. And together they determine what services, needs, equipment, anything that is needed for these students. The beauty of this is it's built team by team, opinion by opinion, of educators and families together to meet the needs of all these students. So that's where it starts. Public, we have a obligation to bring students into the public education and educate them the best we can in the least restrictive environment. And education, it can include special ed, related services, speech therapy, counseling, transportation. Our goal is to help kids make progress in schools, and we monitor that, and we have a requirement of reporting as many times as we report on our report card, we have to report on special ed and the progress students are making. So it is guided, it is watched, and we have annual goals each year. We measure if kids are making progress, and we do a 3-year, every 3 years, we reevaluate a child to see if they still qualify for special ed. So just to start there, and then least restrictive environment. Jack, want to go to the next slide? It explains a little better. It's the same information on both these slides, but I just like this nice pictorial. We all start off with every kid has a right to be educated with his peers. So we start out in the regular education classroom, really with no direct special education support, trying to really help them maintain there. And then as students, in what you'll find about IDEA in the law, it's a failure-based law. And I'm going to sit here as a assistant superintendent and former director and teacher saying that I don't love that fact, but it's the law we have. And it's based on failure. As students don't succeed at a certain level, you add more supports. And that's hard for people, someone to say, well, why aren't you more proactive about special ed? It's not a proactive law. And I need to kind of say that this is based on students' inability to be successful. And we add supports as we need to along that way. So then once they're not successful in general ed with a lot of supports, we will pull them out into specialized resource rooms and do that. If they're not successful in the resource room and going back in the regular classroom, we self-contain. And we have self-contained programs that were approved through in this district, that we are approved by the state of New Hampshire to run. And then if that doesn't work, we look at day programs, such as Parker Academy, such as Lighthouse, such as sometimes Spalding or NFI or Nashua Children's Home. We have a plethora of programs that we do place into for day placements. And then if day placements aren't working, we move to residential. And sometimes factors affect this placement, such as courts or hospitals. They can affect this. So we can have a child that's court involved, that they will place. They're foster involved, removed from their family, they are placed. They are hospitalized and can't remain back into our community, they are placed. And we are responsible in all those cases for the educational component of their education. So sometimes we don't have a choice where they go. And we have to say, okay, we'll still meet their needs under FAPE, free and appropriate education. So just kind of wanted to walk through that part before I start with some of my numbers and understanding that. So what do we do in student services to really try to be fiscally responsible and make sure that we are utilizing funds in a way that are appropriate and putting structures to it? We have a consistent form. So if you are identified as a child with a speech and language impairment at Christa McAuliffe, that same form and process now is used over at Millbrook, Broken Ground, across the district. We put that in place. After I did my review 3 years ago, it was one of the most glowing things. And we put in place an entire special ed manual that is online, that has all of our forms, our processes, our protocols. It's very clear to our assistant principals or our directors how you go about enacting special ed in this district. We've done a lot to do that. Requests for projects and funding. If they need something different that wasn't asked for prior to budget or prior to a new need walked into the building, we have a process for doing that. Transportation, we have a process for making sure they qualify for transportation and how to inform maintenance transportation that happens. We have an independence form that we put forth. If we have a child that needs supports through an educational assistant, we have a rubric and a level that we use to really identify what the needs are. We set goals based on those needs, and we put an independence goal in the IEP to say, we don't want a kid dependent forever on an education assistant, and we're working towards moving away from that. Because EAs are personnel, and that, again, is a financial cost, and we try to say, is it a necessary cost, and are we making kids independent and giving them a free and appropriate education? Weekly meetings, monthly office meetings, grant meetings, school visitations and team meetings with them. Out of district, our coordinator of out of district programs, Jessica McKay, does an amazing job with putting protocols and processing for foster kids, for homeless kids, for kids who are court placed, for kids who are in treatment of care. We do a nice job with protocols. Medicaid protocols. Molly Lanigan goes to every building and trains everyone on the Medicaid, so we're getting the optimal amount out of our Medicaid reimbursement. And then again, I meet with the OT and speech for the same reasons. Those are typically the people that know the most needs coming up for either services or equipment or adaptive materials. There's a cost to that. I try to stay very in tune to that and stay ahead of that each month. So one of the requests I had by Board Member Hastings was to, next, Jack, if you can go, is to look at caseloads. So here you have it. They're pretty balanced across the district. And one of the things we do is we kind of spend some time together as a team prior to transition, and we do kind of a 1, 2, 3 rating based on support. 1 is very minimal support, 2 is resource room and supports, 3 is really more profound, heavier disabilities, low incident disabilities, and heavier supports. And we kind of use that system we have for a few years now since I've come, and try to balance caseloads off of that. You know, like not so someone doesn't have all the 3s or all the 2s. We balance so we can balance their time. And you'll see some may be higher. That would say, well, they have more 1s in their caseload. It's a way for us to work as a team and balance these off. The highest one I have anywhere, and my highest kind of percentage is really Krista McAuliffe right now. You'll see that when I get into it. It's a concerning area. It's not so profoundly ahead that I asked for another position, because I didn't at this point. But Superintendent Murphy and I have had a discussion, and we may be talking later about contingency and about doing something based on our influx of kindergarten and what we don't know out there. And you'll see some referral numbers that are pretty alarming to me that you will see as I go through my slide. So again, the next page is just high school. Very similar. We seem to be pretty well staffed there. And it's similar. There's nowhere to say, oh, can I move or I cut? No, they're pretty balanced if you notice what's there. And those ones that are 8 or 9, you'll see are my autism programs and more of my specialized programs. So, 5 years of special education. You know, this is a lot of data we collect, but I am in our office, and Dawn Silly, who's sitting behind me, that I told them I'd make her speak tonight. She's behind me. She's the mastermind behind this data collection that I don't want to take credit for, because it's hers, and she does a nice job keeping me informed and where we sit. You will see we're at 18%. That's lower than the state average right now and the national average in our identification. So we're averaging nationally between 18 and 22%, between 20 and 24% nationally right now. And state-wise too is in line with that. We're a bit under that, which tells me our teams are doing their job, and they're referring a lot of kids, and they're still saying, no, this is the threshold of qualifying, and we seem to be in a good place right now.
Could you just back up? Because I would see if we were under the threshold, the average of identified kids, that maybe we're missing kids.
You'll see when I get to referral numbers,
Okay,
and I think that'll tell you that does not appear to be the case.
okay.
Okay. And if you still think it is, we can discuss it once I get through that, but I can certainly get to that.
Ms.
Yes.
Higgins?
To clarify on your question, so sometimes numbers can look low because a child doesn't qualify. Like IQ and achievement match, even
Yes.
though the child's a grade and a half level behind and nothing seems to work, they don't qualify for special ed services, so they wouldn't appear. So does that make sense? There's a lot of kids.
I understand there's a lot of reasons kids won't qualify for services, but if the national average is 20 to 25%, and we're lower than that, then it makes me concerned that kids who need services aren't getting them, aren't getting it.
I don't believe so, but I can talk
Okay.
about because of the fact they've been through an evaluation process. Our numbers of kids that went through an evaluation process is pretty high. And what we're finding is after that evaluation process, some haven't reached, and again, I said to start, they haven't reached the level of failure yet. And I say yet because sometimes kids are assessed in preschool, again in 3rd grade, still not identified, and then we test them again in 6th grade and they qualify. And that's a reality of sometimes as they progress, they're not making the swift enough progress so they do eventually get identified. And that is the law. Like I said, don't love it, but that's the law we're faced with. So again, the next page is more 9th through, and you'll see our preschool. Okay. So next is our audit district, and I broke this down differently this year to try to I spoke to it briefly when we started about the number of what is made up of out of district. There's areas in here that we control as a team and our placement teams in the buildings. And that is placed by special education teams, that 16 number you see right there. That's, again, a very good number. That means we have a wide variety of programs for our students here in Concord. And we're able to, with the use of working with our alternative high school at Second Start and the work we do here in the district, we're in a pretty good place with that 16 number. And that looks pretty good. Then there's ones that are placed by the courts, as I talked. There's 3 there. Then there's foster placements, another 10. Then there's, and then there are day and residential placements. So you'll see 27 day educational residence placements, 2. Next page.
John, on
Yep.
that, if you don't mind, does Second Start and the new program for the middle school count in these numbers?
Nope, because those are district programs that we have a relationship with that are more fluid. Those aren't considered, for we are out-of-district placements at this point. They're an alternative placement.
Can you explain what happens within, I guess, between middle school and high school, where we go from 3 to 13?
So, I talked about qualifying thresholds and where kids fall out of that continuum. They fall out of continuum. We've tried the regular classroom. We've tried resource. We've tried self-contained. I would say mental health is a huge factor in that, Barbara. Brenda, I think it's a huge factor right now in what's happening.
So they were okay in middle school, but by high school, we have that many becoming unokay.
And it's
Can't
double-
even stay in our.
Yeah, and you gotta understand, that's to 22. So the scope of that is not from 4 years. That is from 14 to 22.
Okay, thank you.
You know what I mean? So some of those Irish replacements have been with us
Okay,
since they were 14,
okay.
and they stay with us. So it's sometimes that we think traditional school of years, this goes to 22. So we have, I'll tell you, out of that number right now, next year projection, I'll have 3 or 4 over at our project search program of the hospital. So they'll be placed there, it'll be honest replacement, but it's right down the street and I get to see them all the time. And they're doing really well. But they're 20 years old, they're 22 years old, and they're working towards getting job placement. So it's kind of, that number, that is why the increase right there.
Okay, thank you.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
sure. So again, you'll see just across the numbers, episode treatment is a thing that is new to New Hampshire, and it basically means that if kids are in dire need at home with foster care, with DCYF, the state will step in and place them, and we're responsible for the educational component of that. It's kind of newer. It's a good program. It's called it's run through a company called Fast Forward, and they connect with us a lot. We have a lot of communication. They sit as part a Fast Forward worker sits as part of our IT team meeting, and they just decide this child needs more than they can have, and they place them. Parental placed in charter schools, no say over that. We have 20 students with IEPs in charter schools. Parentally placed in other schools, we have 1, and then parentally placed in private schools in Concord. So we are responsible, although they're not in IEPs, if they need services, we still have to work with them and help them and support them. So those are things just to be aware of, that there's a large number
And
that we do through our office.
if we're providing educational supports to students that are in other schools, are we receiving adequacy aid for those students or any state reimbursement for those students?
If they're in charters,
If they're in charters or private schools?
private schools, not necessarily, Jack, right?
I'd have to confirm that. I mean, I know
Yeah.
in the thing we're looking at with the EFAs, there's,
Yeah.
it's like actually there is a special ed column,
Yeah.
so.
We'll get that information for you, but
Thank
it's
you.
like, right now, if they don't, they're not on our roster to attend, typically not, but we have to provide. So, for example, some of these private school kids, they're housed in Concord, so we have to evaluate them, and we have to do that. So if there is a private school in Concord, we are still the LEA responsible, even though they may live in another town. we have to assess for special ed if they live in, if the.
Do we then have to provide their services?
No, we don't provide services.
Okay,
We
we
just
just
provide
assess.
what we call an ISP.
Okay.
Which is individual service plan. It's not an IEP, it's an ISP. It means that here's what we recommend you do to accommodate. It's kind of like a plan to help them
teacher,
educate the
yeah.
child, to
It's
teach
like
the
an IEP for
teacher.
the teacher.
We teach the teacher how to help teach the kid, and that's all our role is. So is it our time? Yes. Is it a service like sending OT, PT, speech? No, it's not any of those. It's just like providing our time to use our evaluators and use Jessica McKay, who's a certified special educator, to set up the ISP. With that, does that explain?
Do we keep track or data on families who have students that would qualify for IEPs but have the evaluations done outside of the district?
They would have to come to the team and ask for a referral if that was the case.
Okay.
So if they don't ask for referral, I wouldn't know
You
them.
wouldn't know that? That's
No,
okay.
no.
All
It's the
right.
the only thing that tracks us to get involved is a referral meeting. And doesn't mean we have to assess or accept it. It just means that we have to have a meeting to talk about it by law.
That's not a huge expense, obviously.
No,
because we don't-
it's just time. It's
Okay.
time and personnel to set the meeting up, have the people present, be away from kids because they're in a meeting. That's,
Well, and I was going to ask if
It's-
there's still a wish to not have separate testing and service teams.
you mean separate than in the school?
Yeah, well, yeah, you'd have a team that tests students, as you said, you're getting a lot of,
It's possible, in our future for if these numbers increase outside of our district. I'm watching it. You see, I watch the data and the yearly trends of these. If we get to the point where I think that it's too much of a burden on our personnel to do that, I'd certainly come with that recommendation. I'm not there right now because it's only, like you said, if it's 14 throughout the year,
right.
that's not a lot with all of our buildings because we have a rotation basis that each building team takes one. So right now, that's 2 per building. I mean, it's not to a point where I think that it's become a huge
But they're
burden.
also doing evaluations in their buildings.
Right.
Which can be a lot.
Right. But to hire a full team for 14,
Right.
I'm not there yet.
What
So
about hiring a team for all of the evaluations?
the problem is they don't know the student.
Yeah, we understand that.
They don't know the student, and that's that's why the district went to the amount of school psychologists it did. It's a rarity around New Hampshire. When we did the data, I don't know if you remember when I did that whole data crunch of all the different districts around us, we're much higher in school psychologist support. And one of the reasons is because we've decided that we want the school psychologist to know the child before just assessing with numbers. We wanted them involved in the schools, involved in the treatment, involved in all that, and that's been our way about going about it.
One final question.
Sure.
Are you able to keep track of how many students don't receive services because special ed teachers are in meetings or evaluating other students?
We always track that, and we always make that. We make that up. We track it. We have a process to track that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at some point, could we see what those,
I don't know.
okay, all right.
I give you general numbers,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's very hard to not identify. I have to be very careful
I know we
about
might
that.
do that, right.
Yeah, I have to be very careful about that. So I can certainly talk in general, like what's an average in the year.
Yeah,
But we write our IEPs for amount of services per month. Granted, knowing that when we agree with the parents that we'll do this many services per month because this is the schedule we
It's what we
need.
can fit in.
And if the child's not making progress based on that, we have to reassess the next year. But if, again, the least amount, this is based on giving children the least amount we can to rise them to more of making progress, making
Well, it's
adequate
good
progress.
I just know from personal
Right.
experience, that was a frequent
Yep,
concern as a teacher.
right.
That students weren't always able to get services because the teachers were evaluating or in meetings.
Yeah, and we do the math on that to say, like, here's the number of meetings you typically have per month, here's the number of times that we'll need services, and we agree upon a number. And the parents are involved in that agreement.
Just want
And-
to make sure you got
Yep.
what you need.
Yep,
Oh, thank you.
yep. Want to go on? Multilingual learners. Again, this is our former, we used to call ELL, but our new language is multilingual learners. You'll see there's a pleasant story here about our identification of students. The numbers declining, it fluctuates. It was 228, 320, 313, now 266. We're declining a little bit, mainly at the high school is where we're seeing a little bit of a dip in students. And there's some good news why. If you go to the next page, Jack. Our educators are pretty involved. We've been working with a consultant, as you know, to do kind of an action plan and working on it. But along the way, we've had 46 students in the past year test out, which is pretty good. Which means they get to a point of a 5 or a 6 on the WIDA assessment, which is like a scale 1 to 6. It's kind of in there, and they're doing real well, which means they go to monitoring status, which means we monitor them. We make sure they're doing it. We check in with them. How you doing? We check in with their teachers. We still use our elevation software to kind of give some tips on where they are and what would help work with them. But those are pretty good. That's a kudos point right there, I think, to our teams working well together and collecting good data. So move on. Homeless. As you see, is our homeless data staying very consistent. Very consistent. And again, just so you're aware, next slide, if you will. Those are systems in place for our supports that work together. We meet, Erin Care and Fern Seiden meet with them bi-weekly and kind of make sure we're there. We have a system in place to assess and evaluate students in their homeless, and yearly we do an assessment to make sure they're still getting all the services they need. Referrals. So
Just the homeschool liaison, is that a liaison for homeschooling or is that for homeless?
no, it's our homeless. So these are people that are through partially funded district, partially funded through a homeless grant, partially funded through Title I, and they are basically they work between home and school with all of our families that are experiencing homelessness in the buildings.
So it's, if you have a social worker, you might not have,
Exactly.
okay, I just was trying to
Yeah.
figure out why some had one and some.
Because social worker is its own degree and its own certification, and if you don't have that certification or degree, I can't call them a social worker. So it's kind of, they function
Might be
in a
doing the same
role.
thing, but-
They function in a role similarly, but they don't have the degree of counseling and the role of clinical side that a social worker does. So some places, like you'll see Beaver Meadow, I have the 3R program, so I have a social worker there because she has a clinical side to her. And the same thing with the, Runlet in the high school. I try to do that. We have both at the high school right now.
Mr. Richards, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, what percentage of that 101 kids get multiple or even one of those people matched up to them?
All of them.
Okay, that's the answer I wanted to hear.
I knew that.
I just thought I'd ask to be sure. Thank
They
you
do.
very much.
They do, and they're monitored. They're monitored bi-weekly too. We have a list and we go through them, so we make sure that we are. That status changes daily. There's no affordable housing where we are right now. And everyone knows that. It's a big, huge problem we're facing, and so families are staying homeless for a little bit of time, and sometimes moving out of our district because they can't. They're getting placed in housing outside the district, and we support them in that. And if they qualify for McKinney-Vento in the 2023-24 school year, even if they move over to Bow and they find a house, a temporary housing, they can still come back to Concord for that continued year until it's established housing. So we own them for the year, is the way it works. So yearly we assess this.
I just wanted to make sure that there's someone that each and every student, child could reach out to. Thank you.
Thank you. So next one is referrals. Jack, if you will. So this is my story that I think President Walsh, you asked that question, and you'll see the number of referrals that we are conducting right now. We have currently in our preschool, we have local communities If you look from 21 through 122, 92, 97, 99, there has been a lot of referrals. And we are identifying a portion of those throughout. You'll see this is, I think our system is strong and have a process in place for this.
Do we know how our number of referrals, percentage of referrals, given the number of students, compares to state or national averages?
We're pretty on par right there. Preschool, we're elevated. It's an anomaly that I speak to the other directors and I speak, this is an anomaly and it so there's good things that happen and there's things you're like, there's bad things that happen. This is a good thing and it's a good problem to have. It strains our support and those people are busy and Sue Carrigan, my preschool coordinator, is on roller skates all the time to try to make sure she meets all the requirements to get these referrals in. But it means our community knows we're here. It means our child find is working, that we have an obligation to child find. And they're reaching out to us to say, these local daycares and preschools, Erin Care meets with all of them as the early childhood coordinator. Weekly and monthly, she meets with them. She does training with them. They know where we are, so the referrals are coming in quick to us. It's a good thing. So I don't. It's like, what are your bad problems you have? And that's kind of like one of those things I look at and say, I don't know, because it means that people are referring a lot. The issue is there's a lot of need out there, and you'll see our numbers show that there's a lot of need in the community. So keep going, Jeff. Over my time, Kim. Sorry. Preschool, again, numbers, they are, just shows you where we are. We have, I'm glad we expanded and went to Abbott Downing last year. We filled it right up. That's where we are. That stays pretty consistent. That's been fairly consistent and growing. And then medical students, this was something I remember a couple years ago I had to come to the board and said, after COVID, we had a lot of kids with some medical needs. This number is working pretty well, and it's decreasing the number of supports. You see we don't have any more additional RNs than are already in the buildings. Students are able to be capable with either an LPN or an LNA, and those are our severely medically fragile children. And that's just to let you know that. And then we have multiple contracted services that you know, physical therapy, additional service providers contracted, clinical school psychologist that oversees and meets on our most needy kids, outside assessments that we're required by law to do if it's required, Bill White services and other services, and attorney fees. It's my life. And then some refinements I've made. Next slide, Jack. I moved to 2 different companies for BCBA services last year, and it is really working well at the high school and middle school, where we have registered behavior technicians, and we have, we have training going on right now. We've worked with some neurodiversity and natural environment training. We have monthly meetings with our autism teams. They've been very positive. We sit and talk about all the students that fall on the autism spectrum, and then, of course, our MTSB work, and as you know, we've talked about 2+2+2, and our apprentice children trying to grow our field. Questions? So you'll see in there, what you didn't see was there's no additional staffing requests at this time. I feel that we're, by our numbers, there isn't a huge influx or change in those. I'm concerned, I told you, Krista and probably Abbott, 2 places that I'm seeing an increase in some caseloads that I'm monitoring and watching right now. I still have 99, we have 99 referrals in the preschool. And until those are evaluated and through the process throughout the year, I'm not sure of my kindergarten numbers coming in, and I can't do that. So it's going to be some of those things that Kathleen and I have talked, and it's going to be something that might come at a later conversation. And like I've done in the past, I'll come back to you next year and talk to you about it when I get here in September and October, and we'll tell you what we did.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Anyone have any additional? Mr. Richards?
Just one question of something you didn't cover, space. Some of the programs take up fair amounts of space. Where are we? Are we cramming people in? What are we in a school by school you have any concerns or issues that you'd like to bring up?
If I had a wish list, or are you talking
No, I'm not really talking about questions. I'm talking about concerns with real serious issues.
Okay, no, I think I'm okay. Like I said, we're tight at, I think Krista's the place that I said because of the number and need. I think that's the place that I would have loved to expanded to put a preschool over there, but based on caseloads and need of special ed we currently have, I didn't have a space. So I held back for a year on that. Middle school is the middle school. We know that issue. I'm moving in. Matt Cashman and I walk every year in June and talk about kind of what I have to move, where I have to move it, what kind of different supports we have to put up, moving swings, moving some of our apparatuses. High school, we're okay. So I think we're okay. I told you my concerns stay the same with the caseloads. It's at really Krista's got a pretty big caseload right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Speaker?
In thinking about the cost of transportation for services outside the district and how high that's getting year over year, is there a service that we could add in district that would eliminate the need for transportation so that we can provide it in district? I see you looking
Yeah.
right at Jack.
We've
been
mentioned,
scheming.
I think, that a little bit
Yeah.
to you about that, about offering a non-CDL requirement component of things. We don't have the room up at the conf. We would need to get somebody to run it, and we have to be able to get vans, all of which are difficult to get. So when you look at, we're gonna probably spend an extra $700,000 to transport. It's between $400 and $600 a day to transport the kids. But, is this is this the post-COVID, or is this something that's gonna be consistent? But we are trying to figure out how could we be able to do that. As we said, even the buses that you've preliminarily approved are 9 months to get.
Right.
So trying to get 10 passenger vans and doing that is a challenge.
And I understand the transportation finagling. I actually mean like the actual service that is provided outside of the district. Is it even possible? Are these facilities that these children must go to, or is it a person that they go to that if we hired someone internally, they would no longer have to be transported outside of the district to be served? Does that make sense?
Do you mean like the school that Merrimack Valley School District has, for example, that's specifically for kiddos who are struggling within the normal school setting?
I mean, because I'm not an expert in this field, I don't know exactly what they're being transported out of the district to get, like what they're receiving, and so I'm curious if we can offer services in district so they don't have to be transported every day somewhere else.
Well, they don't go out of district until the in-district services are no longer working. So if a student's
Right.
out of
Right.
district,
So I'm
There's
saying,
no-
Means, like,
I'm saying
what
if
is the thing that's missing?
if the cost
Right.
year over year is hundreds of thousands of dollars to transport
so
kids.
we
but-
build a residential facility, like.
Well, and
She's
that's,
just asking if there's a layer.
No, I'm not,
Yeah.
right, if there's like a tiered level of service, like, is it unreasonable to think that we could create that service in district so that we no longer have to transport them?
So for an example of that is the MAP program that we've created. We've done that because the kids that we needed something different than we did, and they were exhausting that top level of the continuum. Sometimes it's the best for the students and the family to have access to these very therapeutic and very specialized schools that do this. For example, the Monarch School has been around since the 1700s to work with autism kids. I would think we do an amazing, great job, but when you get to some of these real strong disabilities that need more care than we can provide and keep them and our staff safe, sometimes we have to turn to them, and that's what their expertise is. And we have an obligation to do that. Only if we could provide, which I don't see how, the magnitude of staff and on-site health providers they have at these facilities, it wouldn't be cost effective
And that's really my
whatsoever
question, is
to do
if
that.
transportation continues to be
Yeah.
expensive, could
Yeah.
actually building out that service in district be possible? But that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question.
But the transportation also is, do we know what the breakdown is, the transportation cost for out-of-district placements versus foster care and homeless? Like, which is driving our increased transport? I mean, we have more homeless students, I don't.
It's all mixed in because the
Yeah.
fact of the volume. It's a volume problem, not a, and again, I showed you that chart to show you, there's some way beyond our control. I mean, fosters, homeless, episodes of treatment, those are all beyond a child that moves to a charter school that was currently in our school that had transportation in the IEP, we transport. Those are things that parent has choice on. We don't have say. So some of those and we have a process to control them, but.
But the night we do transportation, we can give you a breakdown of that. We may have to be non-public depending on what it is, but we can give you that breakdown.
Yeah.
Because there's a list, I think it's 30 or 40 long of all the various
Oh, yeah.
transportations that
Different
happen.
kinds.
And it's a daily occurrence as
Yeah.
far as changing. Yeah, so we can do that.
Hastings?
What are professional services for pupils?
Where are you,
More
Barb?
specific.
Brenda, I'm sorry, where are you?
Page 3, slide 5, 1,775,775.
Check that your way.
Oh, yeah, that's the BCBA's, that's.
Oh, yeah.
That's Bill White, that's,
Bill White, White
Yep.
Birch, all of our OTs, all of our PTs, our clinical psychologist is in there.
They're not covered by salaries of employees?
No, they're not employees. These are contracted services.
we have to contract it out because we either don't have that support or.
Yeah, those are all any kind of contracted services that I do to support
So
students.
the OTs in the school buildings aren't school employees?
OTs are, I said PTs.
PTs? Okay.
PTs. I think I said PTs, I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, you might have.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, any others? All right, Ms. Yarlett.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
I feel like
Fabrizio.
this happened to you last year too. Next year you should ask to switch.
Yeah, so sometimes John's presentations are their own night because it's a lot of information. So we'll see if I can get through this. We'll go up to 7 and maybe have to reschedule if we need to, so. I'm going to start off
Some open
with.
sessions. so,
Yep,
yeah.
perfect. Start with Jack.
Okay. So this item, this is in your folder. I did upload them right after the meeting had started. And we're just going to talk about the curriculum instruction assessment budget. We'll go through the work session schedule, where you can find the public information, and then we'll get in. I'll be done for the presentation, but you do have a non-public session tonight and a non-meeting session. So we'll have a slide for that. So at a high level, going through a budget, the curriculum instruction covers these items. And again, this is dictated by the financial manual through the state. I'll give you a high-level view of, there's the budget summary by object. And then I'll go through each piece real quick. You do have the salaries. In particular, that 20,000 is a request to increase stipends for professional development. So that is what that is. And then that obviously trickles through other items.
Where is that 20,000?
The very first line says personal service.
Slide 7.
Personnel services, salaries, next. So I take the summary and now I go through each of this is the detail of each of those at a high level. Obviously, the health insurance, FICA, New Hampshire retirement. The one I may have mentioned the other night, we were increasing was because of the course requests for unaffiliated. That's that 6,000 going from 18 to 24,000. And then the one by collective bargaining agreement is the CEAA one for 4,000. All the rest of them are tied as the salaries go up, the health insurance, dental, that kind of thing. As far as the other professional services, this was contracted services for professional development. We're decreasing that. That was, one, the purpose was because Title II is available now. And two, when we had put in the PD salaries, it was all put in as one line because we didn't know what was going to be what, whether we were paying staff or it was all going to go contracted. So the 70 originally went under the PD, that's requested to go to 90, hence the 20 at the salary line. And then this is going down to 80 for contracted services. So it's not double dipping, okay? All of this here, besides the first and second line, are all collectively bargained. So that's what's in the amounts in the CBAs for the purchase services. Then we get into the supplies, books, and utilities. So that second line, the 302,500, the 300,000 is what's offset by the instructional trust, and you'll see that later in the presentation. As we mentioned, we were going to be doing a transfer out of that to pay for new curriculum or modified curriculum. You get into that. So that's what I just wanted to highlight. That's where that increase is. And as I mentioned to you, we redistributed the info access and the software to the appropriate lines. So those kind of things include, and there were some things that were surprises that came in because post-COVID, one particular vendor, when you purchased the item, you got a free software, in particular called FunHub. Well, we got the onslaught when they came back to school and it wasn't working because they went from giving it to you to charging $95 per license. So it was already embedded in, so it's pretty good. Yeah, I was a little frustrated by that one. So it's budgeted for now, but we got through this year and kind of coalesced what all those licenses should be. So still working with the vendor on how, when you do new things, that the license isn't automatically included. So going through terms and conditions and working with them. Kind of don't like that, but anyway.
How much of these are real increases versus transferred from other lines in the budget?
So most of that is transfer from other lines. Typically, software and info access are 5 to 8% increases. That's typically what they run. The new component, which you mentioned, is the adding grade 4.
So we added grade 4 iReady this year for the diagnostic and the instructional component, whereby the teachers will go on and say, based on this child's performance and scores, these are some instructional techniques, methodologies, systems that you could use to remediate whatever loss there is. So the instructional component was free for us this year, and next year we're purchasing that.
But we'll give you the breakdown
And
of
do
what all
we
they.
know that teachers actually use it? I looked at the parental instructional thing and I found it remarkably unhelpful.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, are teachers actually
Yes.
using their?
Yes, they are. They are all doing a 3-year assessment, fall, winter, spring, or end of year, for comparison purposes, and then they're actually able to put the students on iReady, that they can program it so the students can go on and interact with instruction as well.
I got my kiddos' iReady results for the fall and winter, and it's already showing growth, which is really nice. And also, just anecdotally, it created a really nice conversation between her and her teacher, because her teacher was saying, "You're not exactly where I'd like you to be yet, but look at how much you've improved. Here are the things that we can work on." So I'm finding it to be, from a parent's perspective, really useful in the classroom and being able to report out to me as a parent and what increases exist, where the grade level expectation is, and where she's sitting. So it's been pretty decent so far for it only being
Yeah, and the
2
research-
times.
That part, it's just like they have a click here for resources for your children.
Yeah.
And it's
The parent
useless.
part's not helpful.
Fair enough.
Make sure the teacher portion is not as equally.
Yeah. That's a fair question.
So, anyone else have anything?
No, do all those services come together? Is that your question? Like the teacher portion? It must be all comprehensive.
Well, mine was more where she said we're paying to add the instructional
Oh, okay,
portion.
yeah.
That's why I want to know.
It's heavily relied upon by the teachers, very much so.
So I would like to, Mr. Dunn, if you would, you mentioned that these are higher because we've moved them from other lines. I'd really like you to put an asterisk or a footnote and tell us what other lines it was moved from, so we can look at the, sum of
Yeah, when I
what's
do
new
the,
and what's not new and.
when I do the
what
technology, I will show you, this is what 24 was, this is what 25 was. So the difference is anything new or increases. Mostly, everything was in the 2225, 665,000 district line wise. So,
But I
when-
think what we're
Yep.
asking for is, let's say add them all up so we
Yeah,
can
24
compare
versus
24 and
25. Yep.
25 totals.
Yeah, because this is just the assessment side.
Right.
Then you get into
Yes.
some of the regular ed type software, and yeah, this is just a small component. I think we're over $1 million in software and info access fees.
I'm in the wrong industry.
So, yeah, well, when you go 1-to-1,
Yeah.
this is it. So, okay. And then just a small amount for dues and fees, which is a membership to ASCD. So, all right, now I'll turn it over to Kim to talk about the instruction.
Okay, thank you. So for the first 2 pages, it's just a reminder of what our strategic plan goals are for curriculum instruction and assessment, with 4 goals each. And that's just for your reference. Some impacts on curriculum this year. So a typical cycle for us is to do a ongoing curriculum review. And we have a 10-year plan for when different subjects come into place. When we do that, we look at the competencies that are either K through 8 or K through 12. Well, typically they are K through 12. And then we look at the programs that support those content areas. And so 2 years, the first year I was here, social studies was done. And at this point, we've had a committee that has worked throughout the year to look at some materials that we could use that would be common instructional materials. Right now, we're all over the place from building to building, K through 8, in terms of how social studies is being taught. And you'll see a figure of 50,000 that we would want to take from the instructional trust to have common materials K through 8 that would supplement what's being done, take out what's working that's good, and maybe replace things that aren't common across the schools. That's a low number right now. When we were looking at programs, big programs, like you buy the big boxes and everyone has these big teacher manuals and they have the kids' workbooks that go with them, we found that the programs varied so much with our scope and sequence of when we teach certain topics in social studies. It didn't align with our report of student progress in terms of when units fall into certain trimesters, and they also weren't necessarily aligned to standards. So we're scrapping the idea of buying a big, huge package for every building, and this is also something that teachers have said, we just can't teach. We don't have time to teach one big program, but we would like some materials, some really strong, good materials that address the competencies. So this is a guesstimate of $50,000. Likewise, back in November at the instructional committee with Chantel, we talked to you about you adopted the K through 12 math standards last year, and the next step, anytime that you're doing curriculum revision, would be to look at the program and does the program match the curriculum. We're on our 10th year with Eureka. 10 years is pretty much the life of any math program before you start to look at whether or not it's aligned to the standards and practices. And typically, one doesn't last more than 10 years without itself from the publishers being updated. So there is a new Eureka program 2.0. The math committee has met all of this year and are continuing to meet and had a very comprehensive rubric that they've used to analyze, to kind of assess, I should say, the different math programs. And we picked all of ones that were from ed reports that had high marks for research-based math programs. They've narrowed it down to 2 programs, and in March, as a committee, actually the programs too, those 2 programs have been put into the hands of teachers, and some teachers are piloting them. We'll collect that feedback, and the committee will make a recommendation for a new math program to be implemented at the start of next year. It's been a very, very intensive process. I've sat in on several of those evaluations, and from my standpoint, my role was to look at it from how well is the program displayed diverse people, diversity in general. When you have the cute little pictures and stuff, is it the little girl with white, with ponytails, or is it showing different cultures, and is it showing math and different? Can it relate to all students? But there were so many other lenses. That was just one lens that I was looking at. But people, K through 12, looked at the program. We would like it to expand to sixth grade because sixth grade teachers don't have to be math certified. They're still carry the elementary certification. So we'll be coming to you the end of March with a recommendation for a program.
But our programs at math, I mean, we have specialized math teachers at Runland. Did we not? They may not, they're not math certified.
For sixth grade.
But like, you have a math teacher at
Yep.
Runland, so they're not math certified, though.
Not necessarily, they can be, but they don't have to be at sixth grade. The elementary certification goes K through 6.
I brought this up at a meeting, and Kathleen's answer was that less and less people have the full elementary, that you're getting more and more sixth graders that have a language arts cert or a math cert. So I would just caution you to make sure the certification numbers are consistent with implementation of this. I mean, I also know teachers can teach a certain percentage of a subject they're not certified in, so that probably will cover it. But in the scrutiny we've had around certification of educators, you're asking the right questions. We want to make sure our teachers are certified to.
Yeah, and so on the back end of that, the other side is that this year, we looked to align the way the algebra was being taught at Runlet Middle School with the way it's being taught Algebra 1 at the high school. And we found that they were using different resources and programs. So in order to address that, we brought all of the math teachers together at the Runlet Middle School and the high school. We've agreed on one program.
That's great.
Okay, so that's huge.
Algebra
Right?
is algebra.
That's
Is
real
algebra.
focus. And we're going to push, try to get more students in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So we have a pre-algebra program being used at 7th grade. So the 7th through 9th grade algebra program is going to be the same next year, same exact resources.
Great.
So that leaves 6th grade as an outside entity. So for consistency, rather than students getting K through 5 program, something totally different in 6th grade, and then moving into the open up curriculum in 7th grade, most math programs are K through 6.
Right, that makes sense.
Does that make sense to you?
It does, although I have heard that some schools are trying to move towards algebra in 7th grade. And we're not there for 8th grade, so we got to work on that. But but my question is more like, if we are paying for separate teachers for math classes, I want to make sure they are teachers who are well qualified to teach math. And that was more my question about 6th grade, is if we are going to have this system where you have a specialized math teacher and we are not anywhere near where we should be in math, then I don't want to have I don't want to have to pay someone to teach math teachers how to teach math, is what I'm trying to say to you. If we're paying for math teachers, then they should be math teachers.
Yeah. We ask all of them to be OGAP trained, which is really looking at very closely the kind of science of math instruction. And I would say that our math teachers at Runlet Middle School are excellent and well-trained to teach the content area.
You want to have anything?
Nope.
Just one other thing, on the social studies, the state is still very overdue in updating its curriculum.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, are they starting it? Are we gonna pay for a new curriculum and then the state's gonna come in and say we have to change it all, or they're not even? No.
They're not even gonna
They're
bother.
not even,
Yeah.
okay. Well, that's
Most districts
sad.
are going with the 3 Cs, the civics, community, and I forget what the other C stands for, so 3C curriculum, yeah.
That's been going on for
Years.
When I was in my former role as assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction, it was there 4 years ago, even 5 years ago, maybe it was still
It's like
at
6
the
years
state
in the
level.
making of them not
Yeah.
creating a statewide standard.
It's been there for a while.
Yep.
And the other ask from the Instructional Trust Fund is to support, again, we have a new competencies for the CASEL competencies for SELs. The next step is to always look at programming. And right now we want alignment in our programming for schools, K through 5 and 6 through 9, and that's a guesstimate of a number of, because we have not selected a program yet. So it's important to know that no programs have been selected. I've contacted vendors to look at a range, and that those, I feel confident with those numbers, that they're within the range.
Are we paying for any ongoing programs? Like, we have a bunch of different programs that we're using. Are there
We are looking
ongoing
to,
costs for
we're
any?
looking to align that. We have one program that has another year at Beaver Meadow that is paid for, so we might not introduce anything new to them. And this is going to be the decision of, again, a specific committee making recommendations on a program and using the similar process of using a rubric to vet the programs. I think it's one of the goals that we have talked about at the board level is the transitions for students. And when you have 5 elementary schools using 5 different SEL programs and they feed into Runlet, you don't have continuity for students. We want to have this common language of instruction, common feedback languages, common approaches to social emotional learning. So it's best for students. It's hard for educators because they tend to fall in love with a particular program that they're using. But our social emotional learning committee, which is quite large, has across the board said that their number one priority is to align.
Did you have a question? Lisa?
Yeah, I have a question.
It's
This is a little bit different, but going back to the 10-year, if I'm just trying to understand this, every program has about a 10-year life?
That's typical for math and for ELA.
Okay,
Yep.
for math and ELA. And then, so these are at the end of their 10-year?
Our current program is in its 10th year.
Okay, and going back to a question that I know a Runlet middle school parent asked at the curriculum, of when would like a program be implemented and is it effective for 10 years? When would you look at a new program before that 10 years?
So my benchmark is 3 to 5 years that we're doing evaluations of it. And so you certainly could put in a new program. And I've seen that happen in districts. There's a gung-ho, you purchase a program and 3 to 4 years later you realize that that's not the program that you want.
Would you say you were trying to use programs that have been evaluated and have high marks so that hopefully we're not
Yes,
buying
all of
something?
them. All of them are. I think the word they use is exceed expectations in the ed reports. So we didn't bring any forward that weren't high marks.
Mr. Richards? Mr. Richards?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to you're doing 5 or different SEL programs, and we're gonna consolidate down and use all the same one, with the exception of Beaver Meadow, because we have an extra year on that. I would hope, are we gonna tell the Beaver Meadow folks that that is a really outstanding program, which is why they have to put up with it for another year, when everybody else goes to a unified program?
It's very. It gets high marks at Beaver Meadow. The staff really liked it. It's a very expensive program, to the point where I'm not sure that I could, with good conscience, bring it forward. It's it's a heavy lift for professional development. It's great for students, but I think that it's skyrockets. I mean, the price is just outrageous.
So I just wanna know if they're gonna be using it a year longer than everybody else in all the other schools, is it as good or better than the program using in other schools, and you're just not gonna use it at other schools? 'cause
It's as
too
good. It's as good.
expensive?
It's a very,
Okay.
very good program.
Is there cost savings for Beaver Meadow not changing, or just that we won't lose the money?
They signed a contract for 3
Yeah, it
years.
was a couple of years, but we did it through Title I, so it's not gonna affect the general fund
But
budget.
them not going on the same program as everybody else, is there a cost savings to that? Do you understand the
There's one, yeah,
difference,
she wants
the
to know how
nuance
much
of
it
the
costs for Beaver
question?
Meadow. Yeah, that program they have is like 30,000 a year. It's expensive.
But getting back
But I
to
know,
the
yeah, I
question
know.
is, if we put that program we're using at all
Yeah.
the other schools in Beaver
Beaver Meadow,
Meadow,
is there
what would the
additional-
additional cost be?
Yeah, that's just.
I don't have that. I can get
We've already
that.
paid for that, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if we're switching to a new
Right.
program,
Yeah,
right,
we'll get you that. Yep.
is there
Yeah, thank
additional
you.
cost? Because then the question becomes, are we then gonna end up paying to train all the Beaver Meadow folks
Separately.
a year
Separately.
separately and a year later? And is it cheaper to do that now
All at
and
once.
eat the
I see what you're
costs?
asking, yeah.
So
Good question.
if you
Yeah.
can get that back to us,
I
that'd be
will.
great.
Okay, so the next slide. I just really wanted to talk about professional development and curriculum. This year, we did a tremendous amount of professional development, and we had the focus, as you know, was on social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, restorative justice, and wellness overall. Some goals for next year, which this is not an exhaustive list because I'm working with the Professional Development Committee and the administrators to make sure that their goals are represented in professional development. But we're going to want to focus on highly impactful instructional practices, which that terminology itself comes out of the special ed world, but like, what are you using? How are you instructing? Is it working? What level of impact does it have? Continue with restorative justice. We really want the restorative justice to move down to the Runlet Middle School level. We'll have training with any new math program that we adopt. Schoology is our learning management system, and it takes the place of Teacher Ease. We're no longer using Teacher Ease, which is, we are using it this year for grading at the middle school and high school. However, we've had some breach of student identification breaches with the program, so we needed to purchase something different. We ended up looking at 5 or 6 different programs with the committee. We did that over a year. Schoology was the system of choice. This year we're doing a soft rollout with Schoology. We have some teachers training teachers. Tom Crumrine is overseeing that implementation, and next year everyone will need to, in grades 6 through 12, will need to use Schoology for their grading program.
Did these two programs that just take over performance pathways too? Or,
No, I know what you're thinking of. You're thinking of Performance Plus?
yes,
Yes, Performance Plus was a state-run management system for data, for student performance data, and that went away. And so all the districts went out scrambling to buy something new, and we bought EduClimber last year.
okay.
So EduClimber took over Performance
We've asked
Plus.
staff to do an awful lot of switching.
Yes, and that was out of our control. The DOE, literally, every district had to find their own system.
So
So
Performance Plus went out, then we went to EduClimber, and then this year we're in a soft rollout of Schoology, and then next year everybody is going to be required to use Schoology?
Schoology will use grades 3 through 12, but we're not putting a high expectation at all on grades 3 through 6 for next year.
Okay.
It might be minimum, like taking attendance through that program.
Okay.
Because of the lift that we've asked. EduClimber falls more into the elementary side. It essentially creates a portfolio of student learning, collects their data, all of their assessments go in there, you monitor their assessments, you monitor the interventions. After 6 weeks of providing a student with a particular intervention, through the software you can say, is it working, is it not, and then you change the intervention, so it's very, very interactive. We also did even though we purchased the whole program, we didn't purchase the whole program for Schoology because we wanted to be a transition year. We still went very soft on the teachers
Okay.
this
And
year.
what's the difference between Schoology and EduClimber?
EduClimber is a data system that collects all of the, teachers enter all the assessments that they do. It punches out what number of students are meeting standards, what number of students aren't, and then you flag the students who aren't meeting the proficiency or not proficient, and then the tutors will go in and say, I'm doing this with the child, and we'll monitor their progress by dipsticking their progress throughout the time, and then give feedback about whether the intervention is working. So it's a data warehouse system. It basically follows the student.
I get that point. What's Schoology do then?
Schoology it's called a learning management system. It's what Teacher Ease was. It puts the grades, it holds the grades, so all the teachers will put in their coursework.
And EduClimber does not do grades.
No, it does,
Okay.
it does assessments.
And have we stopped using the software that has data leak problems?
This is our transition year. This is our last year with it.
So we're going to continue to use a program that we think is insecure with student data for another year?
We solved that problem.
Then
with-
why are we switching?
We put together a committee, and we had Teacher Ease as one of the products, and we've had students involved, parents involved, teachers involved, And it did not come up as the favored program. Plus, when we had that data breach, it was very difficult. We were on the phone with people all the time. It was not an easy fix. So we found that their customer service was not great at all.
So are we paying for 2 programs for the next 2 years?
No, this year we're paying for 2. Schoology, we're only paying for half of it because we asked them to not charge us the full price.
Okay.
So that we could do, again, we made the decision for Schoology in May. We didn't want to say, okay, all the teachers, you have to use this new program. We didn't have time to train them. So this is a training year.
Okay. But you're saying you're going to do a soft rollout next year.
No, next year's full implementation of
Okay.
Schoology. I'm sorry, it's confusing. There's 2 programs and they do similar things, but Schoology is the soft rollout. I had Tom here at the instructional committee a while back that he tried to do a presentation on the difference between the 2, or he did do a presentation. And I can bring him back to the table to describe how the 2 different programs
I guess
work.
I'm wondering how confident are we that Schoology,
Schoology.
This is my favorite. The name
Schoology
is,
is
selling
going
it
to
all
be
by itself.
our go-to program for after all these changes.
Well, we heavily vetted it as as I said, we had different programs. We all broke up. We did research. We had presenters come to present products. We had parent input, student input, and we also visited school or zoomed in with schools who use it. It's a quite popular program.
Has it been around for a long time? Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's been very updated. So we feel really confident with this program.
Thank you, that's what I was
Really,
looking
really
for, yeah.
confident.
Mr. Richards?
The basic question of, okay, if we stuck with Teacheries, even though they don't have great customer service, but they did do the fix that required it, as opposed to going to Schoology, what's the difference? What are we paying, how much more are we paying for Schoology to roll that out?
I'm going to have to get that figure for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And it's, the train has left the station too, because we have a huge amount of training going on for people, and the feedback has been very positive so far. But I certainly will get you that
Good.
price.
I'd just like to know the cost.
Sure.
Thank you.
I guess with curriculum, we're just, the things that you would want to know about is we're really focusing on ELA curriculum revisions and looking at science. The next steps for curriculum revisions or curriculum review are ELA and science. And in order to do that work, we need to be able to pay teachers over the summer to be doing curriculum work, which comes out of that salary line that Jack shared.
And when do you expect those new curriculums?
The end of next year.
Any questions? All right.
The next page, I'm just sharing that research that I referred to on Monday that was done from the Center of Education Policy Research at Harvard University. And I had emphasized that they're looking at recovery in general nationwide, taking another 3 years for students to catch up in math or to be proficient in math. And so the other question that you had asked on the next page was, what do the math coaches do? And I have here for you, and you can just look at it, over at your leisure. But that's a dual role of both supporting teachers and supporting students. Something unique this year was when the math coaches were voted in last year at the budget sessions. Their salaries weren't in the operating budget, and so we've been paying for them out of Title II funds. And when you use Title II funds, Title II is designated as professional development, and it's not intended to work with students.
I think we had long discussions last year about wanting the funds to be split. So that we could have them work with students.
Some of it's in the operating budget, and some's in Title II. So what I want you to see here is support for students, that they have been working with students. They're just not necessarily pulling students out in a group of 4 into another room, doing work with them or one-to-one. It's more supporting them in the classroom. So it kind of fits the bill for what we were required to do. you also had asked for some student performance data. So I have here for you just one anecdotal piece of data for you. And if you look up on the screen, it actually is progressive. So this is grade 2. Grade 2, then at the same cohort, their performance at grade 3, and then their current performance at grade 4. So when these students were in second grade, what I want you to notice is that with using the computation of subtraction, we had 56% of students proficient at the end of grade 2 with subtraction. They go on to third grade, and now they're being asked to work with subtraction within 1,000. The standard goes up. It's a higher level of operation. It's still within that same standard, which you can see is, it's the standards listed as 3 NBT.2. That's how the standard's written, it's numbers and operations. That same group of students moved up and are performing at 64% proficiency. And then following that same cohort, this is district-wide, following that same cohort of students who were underperforming in grades 2 by 56, with only 56% of students proficient, those students now mid-year grade 4 with the same standard, but now using multi-digits with subtraction and using fourth grade standards are now at 69% proficient. The goal that we had set for them by the end of this year was to be 80% of students to be proficient in that standard.
And this is mid-year, not end of year.
Correct, so we still have time to evaluate them. So is there a correlation between, the math coaches and this data? I mean, I would argue yes, because this type of data is being shared regularly with teachers. Math coaches are very, very good at putting together data and then designing lessons that address gaps in learning. Can I say it's direct? No, because our teachers also have, huge impact. They're working hard. But it's one piece of time that shows how are our students growing, because we're not showing growth on the SAS test with math, but this is the kind of data we tend to refer to or lean heavily into more so because it relates to everyday instruction and real life classroom.
What are we seeing in the iReady data for these,
The
the
iReady,
COVID cohorts, let's call them?
so the iReady data we have on 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. 4th grade, since the program was new to them this year, we made it optional for them to do the fall assessment because they hadn't been trained yet, but most buildings did. And we just got back our mid-year data, and I've invited Chris Demers to come to the table and talk to you and show you some of that data, school by school. But we are seeing gains. It's very, very positive.
Are they in line with these gains?
For student by student is really the way that we look at it.
Okay.
And I would say we're seeing great gains with students when we look at it by the individual. It's positive. It's actually quite positive. And in particular, this is off topic a little bit, but the reading scores are amazing in iReady. That we've seen that high impact, high achievement with reading go from this quadrant down here, low impact, low achievement, to this quadrant up here, high impact. It's if we could get math there, I would just feel so thrilled. But
We will.
and of course, sorry,
Ms. Meeker?
I just said we will.
Ms. Meeker had a question.
Well, I just was curious because we are being asked for math interventionists this year, so can you talk to us about the difference between what the math coaches have been doing and why we are moving to a math interventionist role? Are they the same? Are they different?
I have a slide on that coming up. Do you mind if we wait, and then if you have a question about it?
Sure.
But I'm going to give you the short answer. I don't want them in Title II funds, because Title II is professional development, and if you recall, I had to come and ask you for $70,000 out of the instructional fund last year because it drained the Title II, and it also prevents them from being interventionists where they can actually take small groups. So that's the short answer.
Okay.
So the next one is the not-so-pretty picture of 2022 and 2023 SAS scores. I think our students have a way to go before they are doing that application of their math concepts, and that fourth grade is actually last year's third grade, so they're not used to taking the standardized test. I think that it's developmental for you to be able to just sit in front of that assessment, and we're not proud of this data at all, but yeah.
I would tend to lean on, like you said, Ms. Yarlott, looking at students at an individual level as opposed to overall performance on a standardized assessment. There's a recent study that just came out last week explaining that standardized testing really only shows the income level of a home for a student as opposed to how much they're actually learning in school. Though the data for a standardized test isn't where we'd like it to be, I'm very confident in our ability to identify students on an individual basis and see where their growth points are. So I wouldn't be too hard on us for these numbers, because they really don't paint a full picture of what's going on in a classroom, and is more about the educational attainment and income of their household.
Ms. Higgins?
Yeah, and I would add to that, as a special educator and just a longtime teacher, if you have a headache, you're going to test terrible. If you're having your period, you're not going to test well. If your parents had a fight, you're not going to test well. So it's a measure of that day, that environment, that desk. That's how well you do math today. So along with income and those sorts of things, so much of standardized testing is your ability to do well on that day in that environment. So I always look at standardized test scores with a
Grain of salt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really mean anything.
And the
It means
other
how well you
piece-
did that day.
Thank you, Barbara. And the other piece to that is that when you look at the type of data that we're looking at, I sit in these meetings with the math coaches and the teachers. This is a paper pencil test that they're taking, right? With the one that showed the growth. And when you have that evidence, teachers will literally come into the meetings with the piece of paper and say,
Look at this.
Look, this is where they got confused. This is where they went wrong. That's what we need to work on, that piece of computation, so it's real student work that they're working with. Really makes a difference when students can take a paper and take a pencil and write out a math problem as opposed to, doing it on a computer. It's very different, as you know. So this goes to Ms. Meeker's question. So the proposal is to maintain 3 out of the 6, or have, people would open it up to whoever would want to be interviewed for it. To have 3 qualified math interventionists added to the operating budget, and create a sustainable plan within our schools, allowing for a highly collaborative model to better meet the needs of all students, support our teachers in closing the learning gap, provide early intervention in mathematics, and become more data-driven to make instructional changes, as well as being more student-focused, and that they can engage with all students, and be highly aligned to the curriculum standards.
Can I ask which schools you expect to see these interventionalists in?
As I mentioned last Monday, I feel strongly about supporting Runlet Middle School with 1 interventionist. It's a large school, and whereas the high school has department heads, math department heads, and the elementary school has Chantel's expertise, that's one place where I feel we should target placing 1 interventionist. The others would be to be determined.
So on the chart we have Abbott Downing and Krista McCullough, Broken Ground and Millbrook, and no Beaver Meadow.
This is only new expense because Chantal was going to take Beaver Meadow. That's what she was saying. That person's already here.
Which,
Well, part
Chantal, is
of,
that
so we
Beaver
haven't
Meadow?
gone too far
She
into the
would take
planning.
over
I see.
that
Yeah.
assignment.
So I want to back up a little bit to create a sustainable plan within our schools. We haven't developed that sustainable plan yet, because we don't know if we'll have math coaches, or math interventionists.
so is this another year you're asking for, or these are forever?
Permanent positions.
You're asking for permanent positions, thank you. And are there expenses that were in the operating funds last year that we could now move back to Title II to offset these costs?
Well, hence the $70,000 we reduced that because we knew we were getting Title II back.
Okay. Anyone have any questions?
These positions say general fund Title II.
Originally funded. OF means originally
Oh,
funded in
thank you.
24, so that's where they were there.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
But the Rudlet would be a grant?
Was a grant.
Was a grant.
Was a grant, but now it'd be general.
So these are
Okay.
all gonna be
Okay.
general fund.
So I appreciate your time tonight, and I'm happy to entertain any questions. I know that was a lot of information at once.
Well presented. Thank you both for your time and energy.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So Jack, the 352,000 or whatever it was right back to the end, say that is new additional money that's not granted but coming out of our general fund?
It would need to be appropriated and increase your budget, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So it'd add to what we saw on night one.
That is
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, these are not budgeted positions.
Just a sort of general question to reflect on the conversations we had last year. So we brought coaches back to the table for discussion after the proposed budget eliminated all of them. So at that time, the district's decision was, we don't have the funds, we're gonna have to fall off this cliff, we can do without them. So then we came back to the table and said, well, how can we get at least a few back, right? Because it was eliminating them all, and we were like, let's put a little bit more back in, not all of them, but some. And so what is different this year? Were the math coaches so successful? Were we so brilliant in our decision-making to put the coaches, to keep them in the schools, that something was demonstrated in this last year where you feel now that this is something that should be permanent in the system?
That's a really good question. Sometimes it's that my fiscal responsibility will drive some recommendations. This one, the curriculum and the instruction is what's driving my recommendation. And whenever you start with a coach in a building, the first year is always kind of tricky. It's like, knock, 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 can I come into your classroom? No, you can't. It's like you have to create the culture for coaching. And last year, we trained the coaches in a coaching collaborative model with Jim Knight, and they've joined K through 12 coaches in the district. And we've been writing playbooks. I think you saw the playbook that Chantel shared with you last fall. And we have upped the ante so much for them, their role, how they're looking at data. They're much more accepted into all classrooms. And we have more assessment data using the iReady that we can be more highly impactful when providing supports for teachers. So I think it has a lot to do with, like, our coaching collaborative meets monthly. We have a meeting tomorrow, and we all talk together about best practices with coaching, and I feel like the skill level has really risen.
Ms. Hastings?
Just two questions on this. One, if Chantel is going to be moving into an interventionist position at Beaver Meadow, does that mean we're losing her as the district math coordinator?
No, that goes back to that structure. We haven't built that structure yet.
Okay.
So
I'd have a hard time not having Chantel oversee all of the interventionists.
I just don't know how she could do
and-
both.
Yeah,
I guess.
I would say that that's premature to answer that.
I think what we asked for last year was the structure going forward, and I think before we vote on a very significant new cost, we need a little more information about what the structure would be and how it would serve students. That was the request from the board last year when we said we would continue the coaches for one more year. So I think, in the next month, we need, before we make a final decision on the budget, we need to know what the plan is.
Perfect. And I would really want to involve the principals with that and Chantel. And, the other one idea we said, like, do we just focus on grades 3 through 5? And we, certainly with 2 people at the elementary level, we've had lots of different ideas because we don't have 6.
As long as you figure it out by the end of the month.
I can do that for you.
And I have to say that it concerns me a little bit to see that Abbott Downing and Krista McAuliffe would be sharing a person. But again,
that's not
it's
coming.
not-
That's not coming from our. That's not a recommendation. That was
Okay.
just a model. But
Okay.
it's not.
Yeah, so again, the structure is going to be.
That's not a proposal.
Okay. All right.
I apologize
No,
that it's
that's
in there
fine.
that way, because that's a much more deeper just conversation.
Ms. Robinson?
Yeah, considering we're bringing on a new curriculum, and Ms. Yarlott, you've expressed concern around making sure that Runlet students are supported through that transition, and that having a math interventionist there would be really helpful for student achievement. I wonder why that math interventionist was not added to the budget initially, but an SRO was. Whereas our obligation is to educate students. I would much rather put educators into our budget first as opposed to law enforcement. So I'm not sure if there was, I mean, it's almost a one-to-one on dollars. The math interventionist is a bit more expensive, but that's really only because of the MOU that we share that position with the police department. Should we be switching those priorities?
And that's a conversation
It's
we can
more of a
have with the
hypothetical, I
superintendent.
guess. I don't really expect an answer, but I think it surprises no one at this table that I would much rather have an educator added as opposed to a cop.
Excellent. I'll share that.
Any other questions? We have a meeting with legal, or a non-meeting
We do.
with
We do.
legal
A
counsel.
non-meeting, yep.
And then we have a non-public session.
wanted to have a
On
non-public.
personnel, if the board agrees. I will take a motion to go into non-public session.
So moved.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sergeant, we can't do public comment tonight. We had an we have to get on we can't do it tonight. We have someone we have to get on with at 7 o'clock.
I can't come next week, I have an operation. The following week, because I want to bring up about the huge discrepancy in the cost of the middle school versus the existing school and that. It's like, it's $88 million minimum. And $130
And
or
then
$40 million
we'll have more public,
if we use the existing school.
We will have more
Penny.
public comments sessions before this budget, and many more on the middle school project.
Okay. so-
We're not voting on the middle school project in this budget process.
Okay, well, then I'll come, well, after I have my surgery, and it'll be 3 weeks from now. It'll still be on the agenda, because we're the last suckers that outfit and managed to stick us with in that. And if we
Okay,
were young
thank you.
architects, They should be finding, and they should be sending their resumes out.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Would anyone like to make a motion to go into non-public?
I think Brenda already made it.
Ms. Hastings, was there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Meeker. Could you do a roll call, Ms. Meeker?
Yes. Ms. Campbell? Yes?
Yeah.
Mr. Cotton? Ms. Hastings?
Yes.
Ms. Higgins?
Yep.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Boucher?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And I am a yes.
Thank you.
We are now in non-public.
We are now in non-public,
And I'm
yes.
going to use the
I'll take a motion to seal the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Richards, second by Mr. Cotton. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Meeker, can you take the roll?
Yes. Ms. Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Cotton?
Yes.
Ms. Hastings?
Yes.
Ms. Higgins?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Robinson. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Second by Ms. Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, and
What time is it?
thank you to our Communications and Policy Committee for meeting 3 times.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. And the rest of you.